Hello and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said early on Friday that 2 people were killed following overnight drone and missile strikes on the Slovyansk Thermal Power Plant. In his address, Zelenskyy also revealed that intelligence reports indicated sanctions on Russia's oil industry were poised to have a significant impact.
A few hours ago, there was a strike on the Slovyansk Thermal Power Plant, a strike with Russian bombs. Unfortunately, 2 people were killed. My condolences. There are wounded, and this is being addressed. This is outright terror. Normal people don't wage war like this, and the world must respond appropriately to Russian warfare. There was a report today from the head of our foreign intelligence on the first details regarding American and European sanctions against Russian oil companies. This is quite tangible. Oil exports are the basis of Russian arrogance, and if sanctions are maintained and strengthened, Russia will lose at least $50 billion next year. This could be a strong argument for Russia to have a motive to end this war.
New details have emerged. Washington reportedly axed the planned summit in Budapest between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin after receiving a memo in which Moscow refused to move on its hardline ceasefire demands over the war in Ukraine. Earlier this month, Trump and Putin agreed during a phone call to meet for a second time for talks on how to end Russia's war against Ukraine. The Financial Times reports that the Trump administration cancelled the planned meeting after Moscow sent a memo to Washington which prompted a call between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. According to the paper, Rubio told Trump after the call that Moscow showed no willingness to negotiate. It may have warmed Washington and Beijing's trade ties, but a long-awaited meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping has seemingly failed to move the needle on Ukraine. In fact, exiled Russian opposition leader Garry Kasparov says China is banking on Russia and banking on Moscow's war. His comments are also supported by the EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas. And, as John Todd reports, a recent U.S. intelligence assessment warns Vladimir Putin is more committed than ever to winning the conflict.
Donald Trump whispers in President Xi's ear after their high-stakes talks in South Korea. It's not clear what he said. On his way home, Trump hailed their crunch sit-down as a success.
I thought it was an amazing meeting.
The US leader said a lot of decisions were made, but apart from some headline tariff reductions, it's also not clear whether he made any gains with Xi over Ukraine, in particular weakening Beijing's backing for Putin. Experts say, though, it's in China's interest for the conflict to continue.
China wants this war to continue. China is banking Russia. China is supporting Putin. China needs Putin because this war makes Russia weaker, but also makes the West weaker.
The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, agrees. In an interview with The Economist, she revealed that her Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, told her prolonging the conflict serves Beijing.
His message was that it's not in their interest that this war stops, because then America's attention will turn to China.
NBC News reports that a recent US intelligence assessment warns Putin is more committed than ever to winning the war, according to a senior congressional official. It's a view shared by exiled Russian opposition activist Garry Kasparov, who told TVP World that Putin's maximalist approach to the war has become his only way of keeping power in the country.
Donald Trump's, in my view, very generous offer to Putin illustrated my point that even Trump's offer, which was on the table, that, you know, from our point of view, if we look at this from rational analysis, was great. Putin turned it down twice because he cannot stop the war.
As Russia and China appear set for months more war, at the least, there's no solution in sight for Ukraine's hard-pressed citizens. This is John Todd for TVP World.
Overnight airstrikes by Russia targeted Ukraine's rail infrastructure and damaged high-rise buildings in the northeast, according to local media. In Sumy, emergency Crews tackled fires that raged in an apartment block following attacks by Moscow's forces. The Kyiv Post reports that 15 people, including 4 children, were injured after Russia launched 10 drones at the city within an hour. Deputy Prime Minister for Restoration Oleksiy Kuleba said Moscow's forces had focused on targeting Ukraine's rail infrastructure. A key regional connection hub and maintenance depot in Sumy was damaged. Engineers were able, though, to restore services for morning commuters. In neighboring Kharkiv, railway lines were stuck, forcing trains to take alternative routes and causing delays. The news site reports that Russia also shelled civilian infrastructure in the Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv and Odessa regions overnight. Latvia's parliament has voted to quit an international treaty aimed at tackling violence against women. It comes after a conservative partner in the ruling coalition broke ranks to support the move in defiance of both the prime minister and president. Thousands protested in Riga on Wednesday against the withdrawal ahead of Thursday's debate. The Istanbul Convention was established by the Council of Europe and defines violence against women as a violation of human rights and addresses various forms of gender-based violence. Latvian opponents of the treaty argued it introduces a definition of gender that goes beyond biological sex. They said existing national laws are sufficient to address gender-based violence. One of 3 coalition parties, the Greens and Farmers Union, broke ranks and joined the opposition to push through the withdrawal by 56 votes in the 100-seat parliament. Lithuania's Vilnius airport temporarily closed on Thursday due to weather balloons flying in its vicinity, according to a social media post by the airport. This is the 5th time the terminal has been closed to traffic over the past few weeks. Officials on Sunday halted flights after several objects identified as likely helium balloons used to smuggle cigarettes entered its airspace. In response to recent incursions earlier this week, Lithuania closed its land border with Belarus until at least December the 1st. Andrej Babiš will not continue to provide Ukraine with military support, says Jacques Rupnik, research director at Sciences Po. In an exclusive interview with TVP World On the Record, Rupnik explained that Babiš leans close to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's view on military aid for Ukraine, but will likely stop short of preventing other EU countries from providing aid.
I don't see Babiš continuing this initiative. So he will not be obstructing others in the European Union from providing military aid to Ukraine. But I think my impression at the moment is that he will not be part of providing military aid to Ukraine. And in this sense, he leans closer to where the Slovak Prime Minister is or Viktor Orbán.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán says he will seek an exemption from U.S. sanctions on Russian oil when he meets President Donald Trump next week, arguing that Hungary's energy security depends on Russian pipeline supplies. Speaking on state radio Friday, Orbán said he plans to convince Trump that Hungary is uniquely exposed due to its reliance on pipeline networks delivering crude from Russia. The two leaders are set to meet on November 7th to discuss the sanctions targeting Rosneft and Lukoil, which Orbán warns could harm Hungary's economy. He added that the talks would also focus on reaching a wider economic agreement with Washington, as Budapest looks to balance energy needs with its Western alliances. Student protesters from all parts of Serbia are approaching Novi Sad to be there on November the 1st to commemorate the anniversary of the railway station canopy collapse in the city, which resulted in 16 deaths. One of the groups from Novi Pazar in southwestern Serbia set off on a 420-kilometer journey. The convoy, which made a stop in Inđija late Thursday, had thousands of protesters join them. The 2024 incident has prompted nationwide anti-government protests. Demonstrators are blaming the railway station roof collapse and the resulting casualties on government corruption and are seeking accountability. Anatoliu, Romania's Minister of Foreign Affairs, told TVP World that NATO, and in particular its eastern flank, can trust Washington to keep the alliance safe. The minister's comments in an exclusive interview came after the US announced it would pull 700 soldiers from its 1,700-strong force in the country.
First of all, it's a common responsibility, not just a Washington responsibility, and we need to keep each other safe within NATO, but also we need to be sure we have the proper defense and deterrence systems also nationally. For example, the first defensive alliance that Romania has ever signed is with Poland more than 100 years ago, just to give an example on the continent. In what is concerning the recent decision of US, in that sense, obviously, Romania would have wanted, as well as the entire European Union, I would assume, that we have a steady presence of US or an increase. But the current decision, which is to reassess the number of troops they have in Europe, specifically the brigade that had exercises in Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia, that is currently in Germany, coming back to the United States, is a decision that does not affect the long-term and short-term defense and deterrence capacity that we have on the eastern flank, because it is a pre-prepared decision.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung welcomed leaders from the Asia-Pacific region arriving for the APEC summit on Friday morning. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi were among the leaders and representatives who joined the annual summit of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Grouping. The APEC region accounts for 50% of global trade and 61% of GDP. This year's meeting follows Xi's high-profile meeting with US President Donald Trump that aims to reach a trade war truce on the sidelines of the gathering in South Korea. Poland will soon be able to receive up to 50 million tons of oil by sea, thanks to a major expansion of the country's only crude seaport. The project is vital for the Polish economy as it now gets none of its crude from Russia.
This is Naftoport, Poland's entry point for oil imports from all over the world on a not-so-busy winter afternoon. However, that day was an exception, as the facility processed almost 500 tankers last year and more than 40 million tons of oil. That's why the owner, Polish company Pern, wants to upgrade Naftoport's handling capacity by 9 million tons, or by 1/4.
We're not currently fixated on these 9 million tons, assuming they'll appear in the near future. We're more concerned about having that insurance policy in case of, I don't know, some kind of a breakdown at one of the stations.
Poland has slashed the share of Russian oil in its imports from 91% to 0% in the past decade. With Russian crude, which was supplied via a pipeline, out of the picture, Naftoport became critical for supplying the country's two refineries in Gdańsk and Płock. The expansion will include the construction of the sixth jetty, able to accommodate VLCCs, or the biggest tankers in the world, sea monsters more than 300 meters long. And it's not the only expansion of oil infrastructure planned in the country, with Pern investing in new storage facilities and a strategic connection with NATO's oil pipelines.
We're talking about a 300-kilometer pipeline stretching from the Polish-German border to Pern's facility near Bydgoszcz. It is one of the largest investments in our country's security in the past 30 years.
Naftoport's expansion will cost around 150 million euros. The sixth pier is expected to be operational by 2028.
And that's a wrap for World News. Thank you for being with us and stay tuned for more news and analysis on TVP World. Goodbye.